Good morning and welcome to day 3 of the Green Impact Summit, brought to you by the Green Impact Alliance of the Creative Business Network, Sustainery, and DC. Today's schedule is full of a lot of interesting talks and panels. We're going to kick off here in a minute with a talk about sustainable leadership, followed by sustainable directors, followed by, you'll see a theme. We'd like to thank our sponsors. None of this would be happening if it wasn't for some people that had paid cold, hard cash. And those people are Vækstfonden, the Danish States Investment Fund, the European Union, which I assume you've heard of, and the European Parliament, which I also assume you've heard of. And with that, Cosmina and Martin, take it away.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, so we're going to talk about sustainable leadership, because we believe that sustainability goes hand in hand with the leadership. It's quite obvious, but sometimes we think it's only out there we need to solve something, whereas actually leadership starts from within, at least in our experience. Let me first take you back in time a bit. This picture is called the School of Athens. It's made by Raphael. You can see it in the Vatican, where Pope Julius II had it made for his library. It shows a lot of people from a lot of different disciplines. It shows philosophers like Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Pythagoras, the mathematician, and a lot of other people who are important in Athens at the time. So merchants, builders, etc. It is a melting pot of ideas that are being exchanged between different people, including the business people of the day. Then going forward, in 1819, we have the first business school of the world, ESCP. And a little fun fact is that the co-founder of that, Jean-Baptiste Say, is known to have coined the term entrepreneurship in 1800. So that's a couple of hundred years ago. But actually for a long while, there were very few business schools in the world, very few business books, few business theories. It was not really a knowledge domain in itself. But that seriously changed after Second World War, where there's been an explosion of business knowledge, and 16,000 business schools to this day and counting. Milton Friedman, the American economist, famously said in 1970, the business of business is business, thereby isolating business as a domain from other disciplines. And that has had some effects, as we are now paying the price for, in my opinion. But it's actually a relatively new domain. So if we look at other knowledge domains that are relevant and important to human civilization, here are some of them. You know, nature. We humans probably had to know something about nature already when we appeared 200,000 years ago. Homo sapiens appeared around that time, it's estimated. And in order to survive, we needed to learn about nature. Not within that many years, I believe that we also started thinking about our role in this universe, the purpose. If we say, when do we have some kind of certainty that there's real, profound spiritual teachings? At least 5,000 years ago with the Vedic teachings from India. If we look at philosophy, maybe 2,500 years, of course longer than that, but that's when we have philosophers like Socrates, Confucius in China, Buddha in India, etc. And then science, like we know Leonardo da Vinci from the 1400s. Science goes before that, but it really started to pick up momentum and become a discipline of its own around 500 years ago, and has of course been growing a lot since then. Psychology, modern day psychology, we often attribute that to Sigmund Freud, starting around 120 years ago. And then business, merely 70, 90 years old. So it's a very, very new domain. That in itself is, of course, not a problem. It can be a wonderful thing. But we have to ask ourselves, as we are in this crisis that we are in, is business as a knowledge domain standing on the shoulders of earlier knowledge domains? And I've been pondering about that and on that, and I can see in some ways yes, but actually largely no. It is more the case, just as Milton Friedman dared to say, that business is its own thing. The business of business is business. It's an arrogant view. in my opinion, one that we are today paying the price for. Is it integrated or siloed? Is it in its own box, in the shelf like that? Or is it very integrated with nature, spirituality, science, etc.? Largely, I would say, siloed. Business people of today don't necessarily hang out a lot with the philosophies of today, with the scientists, with the artists. So, in some ways, we might say that it's a toddler running our world. Could that be a fair comparison? If business is a very new domain, it hasn't really learned much from other domains, and it is, quite frankly, running the world today. We might sometimes think that it's the media running the world, but hey, who pays for the media? Just look at their business model. See the social dilemma on Netflix, for instance, if we are in doubt about if that has become different with social media. Definitely not. Financial interest runs the media. And if you notice it, the point in the media is always that we need to buy something. No matter what the problem is, there's always some kind of way that we can buy our way out of that problem. What about politicians? We can dream about that they are on top of the world, but in reality, lobbyism is so powerful that it's more the exception than the rule that politicians actually go against big business interest. So business runs the world, and as we've seen, it's a little bit like a toddler. A toddler can be very charming. We love the toddlers. We know they'll be very useful in the world someday, but at the same time, we probably won't give them the car keys or the mouse to the computer and just think that everything is awesome. So in my humble opinion, I would say business needs to grow up. And what does that mean to grow up? So if we define ourselves as grown-ups, we probably think ahead a little bit more than a toddler would think ahead, if that's fair to say. A toddler is very much here and now. In many ways, business is actually very much here and now. It's always the next quarter. Another thing is empathy. And I mean empathy for all stakeholders. Not only the shareholders that they want a return on investment, but all stakeholders. The stakeholder idea is 30 years old. But I dare to say that it's actually only now that it is starting to really pick up momentum and become mainstream, and something that is seen as a necessity for a business to incorporate all stakeholders. Of course the customers, but also the employees, the suppliers, the local community, the environment at large. A holistic understanding. Like an adult would have a holistic understanding, or at least if you say that it's a very adult and mature way of navigating a problem, that would include, I would say, a holistic understanding of the problem, not seeing it so narrowly that this is all we care about, and then dismissing everything else that happens, the so-called externalities. It would also have a benevolent purpose. A true adult, I would claim, is considering all stakeholders, is thinking about how do everyone have a good experience here. Where the toddler would be very happy to steal all the candy for himself or herself, right? And that's often how business behaves. So we put it up on a pedestal in some ways, and business rules the world in some ways, and also I think it is good to remind ourselves how new this domain is, how siloed it actually operates today. If in a boardroom someone says something philosophical, do you think it's going to be put in high regard? Probably not. Do you think business people of today are inviting philosophers in for a dinner where they actually listen to the input and have a profound conversation that informs how they should run their company? That happened 2,500 years ago in Athens. It happened even during the Renaissance, where they were very taken by these old concepts around 500 years ago. But it doesn't really happen so much anymore. And I believe that a leader that is really an adult, is really living according to those principles, would actually run a business in a different way. We would call that sustainable leadership. You can even go even further and call it regenerative leadership. I love that term. Sustainable means that we can continue, right, as it is now without burning the planet or bringing down all people. Regenerative means that we are fixing something that is already being hurt. For people and planet to thrive, I would suggest that we need wisdom in business. Wisdom from philosophy, wisdom from spirituality, from nature, from psychology, from science. You might be able to come up with more knowledge domains that business could incorporate. And in order to do that, we need many new initiatives. We have launched, Cosmina and I, one such initiative called Heartful Academy. And luckily, I can see that we are not the only ones with this crazy idea that there's something to benefit from in other knowledge domains and previous traditions. Because we've had hundreds of students during the lockdown, during the corona crisis, study together with us these knowledge domains, people in business. So we're not talking about abandoning business or saying business is bad, but just that there's a knowledge here, there's a wisdom here that we can install in our leadership in order for it to be sustainable.
Thank you, Martin. So, what lessons can the leaders of tomorrow learn from these domains? And this is a question that we've been asking a lot as we launched the Heartful Academy. It's a wide body of knowledge if you look at each one of those domains. So we'll just highlight a couple of lessons. So let's take philosophy, for instance. We know this, Socrates popularized the idea of knowing yourself. And it's more important today, I would say, than ever. This notion that we have to live and examine life, that we have to look at who we are and peel back whatever layers they may be to understand our own programming, our own conditioning, and really understand our place in the world. So that's an idea that we submit leaders would serve well, or be served well, to incorporate into their practice. Right speech. So you might argue this is philosophy or potentially moving into spirituality. And it's a notion that we just recently had a session hosted by a beautiful woman from Washington, D.C., who's done a course called How to Communicate Like a Buddhist. She put it on Daily Om and had about 60,000 participants, largely from business world and all walks of life. Obviously very interested in what can we learn from these principles and how that might serve us as a leader. And what this means is really that you want to ask yourself before you start to communicate, is what I'm saying true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? Is it appropriate? Is it even appropriate to say the truth in that moment? Will it help to ease the suffering of others? So this is something that we really feel very inspired by, that the world will benefit if leaders begin to incorporate asking themselves these questions. And right speech is just one of the beautiful principles that we inherited from Buddha. From spirituality, this is one of my favorite topics, higher purpose. I do this work with founders and leaders from different parts of the world around not only the purpose of their companies as a marketing exercise, but actually the purpose of their life, a retrospective on early years as well as professional life and personal life to understand who we are and why we're here. And this is just a beautiful, beautiful practice to keep asking ourselves. Why am I here as a leader? And actually, we all are leaders, so it doesn't matter. It's not about the position or the role or job title. Another beautiful notion from spirituality, we're all one. This idea that actually all of the major religions and spiritual practices around the world agree on this one thing, that we are all one. Like the waves rising from an ocean, we may feel separate, but we're actually part of the same underlying ocean. So it's a beautiful reflection to ask, how might we lead from this place? If we felt that we're one with our team, we're one with our customers, we're one with our investors, they're not just these annoying, greedy people that want to make returns on the work that we do, but actually we're one with them, and we're one with the planet. And from nature, we could spend lots of time just looking at the wisdom of nature and all of the things that we can bring into our leadership practice. And a couple of my favorite tips, if you want, is this idea of sensing what is needed in order to be helpful. So we're often, when we look at nature and we try and find leadership examples, we think of lions and we think of, unicorns, right, in startup talk. But what about the ants? What can we learn from the way that they have a way of knowing what's needed and what role to play in any given moment in order to collectively achieve more? Such a beautiful question. A humble ant, and in a colony, just have a look and be inspired by the way that they they manage to get a lot done without anyone, no egos needing to jump out. Everyone knows what needs to happen. Finding a way despite obstacles. That's a recurring theme in nature. It's this idea of evolution and creatively growing in ways and finding the space to fill no matter what is coming. And more actually, as leaders, we have to really get good at doing this, to see what obstacles are there and not be crushed by them, to work with it and flow with it rather than feel that we don't have a place. So nature is an amazing inspiration for that. We often do these medicine walks, and some of the people in the Heartful Academy community have joined, and that's just to really to take a question into nature and see what answers you get without thinking, so not using so much the mind, but allowing nature to show you. And these are just a couple of points from that. And psychology, wow, that's an amazing domain as well. And a lot is being incorporated. This notion of emotional intelligence definitely is making its way in the business practice. We can be grateful for now having a language of understanding emotions and understanding that our moods are contagious, that there's a range of things that we feel, and to cultivate that awareness to know what's going on within us and also be able to register what's happening for those on our team. So thanking the psychology for that. Science, loads has happened in science. I'm really excited about this idea that our brain, a healthy brain, is constantly evolving, that we do not need to be defined by what we think today, that we can actually change the way we think. We don't need to be defined by what our parents thought and what they believed, by what Milton Friedman thought and what he believed, that actually we can create new synaptic connections in the brain. And that changes who we are, and it changes the way that we show up in the world. Another exciting thing from science, I don't know if anyone's seen this beautiful talk at the Royal Institution, the iconic space where Isaac Newton and Michael Faraday presented their discoveries. We have here Professor David Tong. He's a professor of particle theoretical physics at Cambridge University. And he has about an hour-long talk on the building blocks of life, essentially, and the building blocks of the universe. If you will, think of it as the Lego bricks. So we're in the Lego country. So what are the Lego bricks? What is everything made of? And it's a journey through about 200 years of science. And he arrives at an amazing statement which says everything is actually what we're made of. When you start to break things down, it's not the atom, it's not the up quarks or the down quarks. It's actually something much more nebulous than that. And science calls them fields, liquid-like substances. They don't quite understand how they behave and what they really are, but David says all the electrons that exist in your body are not fundamental. They are waves of the same underlying field, and we are all connected to each other. Like the waves on the ocean, all belong to the same underlying ocean. So here again, we hear this theme from a very different domain, which is the scientific domain. And these are some of the people that have inspired us over the course of the last few months at Heartful Academy. So we have Professor Raj Sisodia, who's the co-founder of Conscious Capitalism movement in the US. Tammy Simon, deeply spiritual practitioner that started a business about 40 years ago around disseminating truth and what it takes to have that conviction of purpose and actually run a business and create something impactful and successful. Neil Donald Walsh is coming up in a couple of weeks on the topic of God, life, and business. So we do go into all of these domains. Olin Douglas from Motley Fool Ventures, Arlen Hamilton. So we bring in people that have incredible stories, incredible knowledge, that dip into these domains or perhaps straddle a number of them to inspire the community. And we've been students of this topic for a while. I would say this is a little book that we published together with Pan Macmillan and the School of Life. It came out 4 years ago, but it's still available out in 8 countries. And it's, again, a journey of what it is like to be a leader outside of the thinking that it needs to be a job, so as a practice. So sustainable leadership, we believe, is based on wisdom. And what does that mean? Is having the wisdom to connect, to be present, to understand what it is that we need first and foremost to heal whatever needs to be healed in our own life, to hold a space and be supportive of others, to do that healing work as well, as the Buddhist practice would say, to alleviate the suffering of others. And also to essentially get out of the way, to allow Mother Nature to heal herself. We run around saying that we need to do this and we need to do that, and action is extremely important. But so is approaching it from a state of being wise and being connected and understanding what ways nature is so fine, actually. If we don't interfere so much, you'll be amazed what it does. And so how might we live in oneness with that? Because we actually are. We are part of nature. So how might we live and how might we inspire our leadership practices from these different domains and from this understanding? And with that, we'll say thank you, and you're welcome to find us at Heartful Academy. Join us for sessions. They're free every week for 2 seasons a year. Thank you.